Elias had always been a man of lines and shadows, his fingers stained with the ink of dreams too vast for his small world. Born in the cradle of Eldridge Hollow, a village hemmed by jagged peaks that whispered secrets to the wind, he spent his days hunched over parchment, tracing routes that no one else dared imagine. The whispering peaks, those ethereal spires that clawed at the sky, had long been a siren's call to adventurers. Legends spoke of hidden valleys blooming with eternal spring, rivers of liquid silver, and ancient ruins holding the keys to forgotten wisdom. But for every soul who ventured forth, 10 returned broken, or not at all. At 25, Elias was no warrior, no seasoned explorer with a quiver of arrows or a blade forged in dragonfire. He was a cartographer's son, slight of build, with eyes like storm clouds and hands that trembled only when the cold bit deepest. His father, old Harlan, had perished on those very slopes a decade prior, chasing a mirage of glory that left Elias with nothing but a leather-bound journal filled with half-finished maps and a warning etched on the final page. The peaks do not yield to the bold, they devour the impatient, yet impatience was Elias's shadow. For years, he had pored over his father's notes, filling in the blanks with his own sketches. The villagers called him mad, a dreamer wasting candle wax on fairy tales. "Stick to mending fences, boy," grumbled the innkeeper, Marta, as she slid him a bowl of thin stew one autumn eve. The peaks take what they want and give nothing back. But Elias saw more. In the curl of a river on his map, he envisioned escape from the hollow's drudgery, the endless cycle of plowing frozen fields and whispering prayers against the frost. Success there meant a name etched in history, a legacy that would echo beyond the grave. It was on the eve of the harvest moon that he decided. Packing a satchel with dried venison, a flint, and his precious maps, Elias slipped from the village under cover of darkness. The path out of Eldridge was a mere goat trail, slick with dew and doubt. By dawn, the hollow was a speck below, and the peaks loomed like judgmental gods. The first days were a cruel jest. Sun-scorched trails gave way to thorny thickets that tore at his clothes and skin. His boots, patched from his father's old pair, split on the third afternoon, forcing him to wrap his feet in rags. Hunger gnawed like a rodent, but he pressed on, marking each milestone with a charcoal scratch. Crest of Thornridge, Day 3. Persistence, he told himself, was his blade. It had carried him through childhood fevers, through the taunts of boys who mocked his ink-stained fingers. Why should the mountains be different? But the peaks had a language of their own, one of howling gales and sudden crevasses that swallowed light whole. On the 7th day, a storm descended, a maelstrom of ice needles and thunder that pinned him to a ledge for 2 nights. Huddled in a shallow cave, he clutched his maps to his chest, the paper curling from damp. Visions plagued him, his mother's tear-streaked face, the empty chair at Marta's hearth. "Turn back," the wind seemed to urge. "You are no conqueror." When the skies cleared, Elias emerged gaunt, his resolve frayed like old rope. The trail steepened, winding through a forest of petrified trees, their branches like skeletal fingers pointing skyward. It was here, amid the silence broken only by his ragged breaths, that he met Thorn. The old man appeared without sound, perched on a fallen log, whittling a stick into the shape of a bird. His face was a map of its own, furrowed canyons of wrinkles, eyes sharp as ravens' talons. A threadbare cloak draped his shoulders, and at his side lay a staff carved with runes that glowed faintly in the dappled light. "You tread the forgotten path," Thorn rasped, not looking up from his carving. "Few do. Fewer return whole." Elias froze, hand on his satchel. "How did you?" The peaks whisper to those who listen. Thorn's knife paused, and he gestured to the staff. "This one told me of a fool with ink for blood." Wary but desperate for company, Elias sat. He spoke of his quest, unrolling a map that showed the peaks, heart, a labyrinth of ridges leading to the fabled Echo Spire. Thorn listened, his expression unchanging, then chuckled, a sound like dry leaves. "Bold lines, boy. But maps lie. They show paths where there are none, hide the falls that claim the unwary." "Then show me the truth," Elias pleaded. "You've walked these trails. Lend your wisdom." Thorn's eyes narrowed. "Wisdom is not given, it's earned in the breaking. I was like you once, 20 winters, full of fire. Chased the spire for glory, for a name. Lost my leg to a crevasse, my love to grief. Now I guard the echoes, the lessons the peaks refuse to shout." He tapped his wooden prosthetic, hidden beneath his cloak. "Persistence is a double blade, Elias. It carves your path, but it blinds you to the turns. The word stung, but Elias pressed. Over a shared fire that night, Thorn spun tales, not of triumphs but failures. Of the climber who ignored a storm's warning and tumbled into oblivion, the scholar who mapped alone and missed the bridge built by forgotten hands. The peaks teach humility, Thorn said, poking the flames. You cannot conquer what humbles you. Seek the echoes, the marks left by those who fell short. They guide truer than any ink. Elias scoffed inwardly. Echoes. He needed roots, not ghosts. But as dawn broke, Thorn vanished like mist, leaving only a small talisman, a polished stone etched with a spiral. Listen, it seemed to say. The path grew treacherous. A rockslide buried his satchel, forcing him to forage berries that twisted his gut. Loneliness crept in, a heavier burden than the altitude. By the 14th day, he reached the vale, a sheer cliff face veined with ice, the gateway to the upper reaches. His fingers, raw from climbing, slipped on a handhold. He dangled, heart thundering, the abyss yawning below. In that suspended terror, Thorn's words returned. Seek the echoes. Gasping, Elias scanned the rock. There, faint as breath on glass, were scratches, not his, but older. Faded notches, like steps carved by desperate hands. He followed them, inching upward, each grip a prayer. Hours blurred into eternity, but the echoes held. At the summit of the vale, he collapsed, weeping, not from exhaustion, but revelation. The path wasn't solitary, it was woven from the remnants of those who came before. The final ascent to Echo Spire was a gauntlet of blizzards and illusions. Winds conjured phantoms, his father's accusing shade, villagers laughing at his folly. Doubt clawed deepest when a bridge of ice cracked beneath him, plunging him into a frigid stream. He washed ashore miles downstream, maps ruined, body bruised. "End it," whispered the cold. "You are broken." But in the river's murmur, he heard them again, the echoes. Not voices, but rhythms, the persistent drip of meltwater eroding stone, the resilient push of roots through frost. Crawling to a hollow, Elias rebuilt. He sketched anew from memory, marking not just terrain, but lessons. Here, listen to the wind's turn. There, trust the old scars. On the 21st day, he crested the spire. No golden valleys awaited, no rivers of silver. Instead, a windswept plateau ringed by cairns, silent monuments to the fallen. At its center stood a weathered obelisk, inscribed not with treasure maps, but proverbs in a dozen tongues. The journey forges the seeker. What is lost in the fall is gained in the rise. Elias traced the words, tears freezing on his cheeks. He had sought conquest, the peaks offered kinship. In that moment, persistence revealed its fuller truth. It was not blind stubbornness, but the grace to fall and rise, to weave solitary threads into a communal tapestry. He added his own mark, a spiral-like thorn stone, then turned back, not defeated, but transformed. The descent was swifter, guided by echoes both seen and felt. He returned to Eldridge Hollow not as a hero with spoils, but a man with stories. The villagers gathered at the inn, eyes wide as he unrolled his final map. The peaks, not as a riddle to solve, but a companion to heed. Marta poured ale, her skepticism softened. "What did you find up there, lad?" Elias smiled, the weight of the mountain still in his bones. "Myself. And the paths we all share." In time, others ventured forth, armed with his tales. Some succeeded, many did not, but all returned changed, their persistence tempered by humility. Elias became the village's quiet guardian, his hands now tracing not just lines, but lives. For in the end, the greatest lesson of the forgotten path was this: persistence alone lights the way, but it is the echoes of our shared struggles that illuminate the heart.